Radio Free Skaro!
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Radio Free Skaro, episode number 893. I'm Steven at Gallifrey One.
Warren at Gallifrey One.
And Chris in Steven's hotel room.
We haven't done this since 2020. We did a review. Do you remember that? We did a review episode of The Haunting
Diodati.
of Villa Diodati.
Yes, we did.
The
Yep,
last
yes, we did.
time that we were in person
Because
together.
we lucked out that it came out at the same time.
Yeah. Ever. I was going to say at Gallifrey One, but ever. This is the first in-person recording
you're right.
we've
Wow.
ever done in 3 years.
Well, if Warren would just,
Yes, if
Get on.
extenuating circumstances would bend to my will, then yes.
avoid the COVID scare and get on a plane and come
And
to
a
Edmonton.
snowstorm
All that
that
stuff.
doesn't allow me to come to Edmonton.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah. I'll get right on that.
Yeah, but we're here. You'll have already heard on the feed our live show from Friday morning, which kicked off this whole convention. Any thoughts on how the live show went, Chris?
It was... I don't want to belittle anything that came before, but it was a lot more fun than some recent ones.
Right?
I'm pretty sure nobody in the audience saw this, but at the outset when Colin came out and there's a whole musical chairs bit and whatever, and he was just giving Warren this look.
Yeah, I have a vendetta against him now.
Yeah.
Kept giving Warren this look for the first little while, and it's
For comedic effect, I would assume.
oh yeah. It was all harmless, but it kind of set the tone, and it was nice and light and jovial and fun.
It
And
was.
Colin was very much on form.
Yep.
I think the
And-
compressed time probably didn't hurt with that.
Yeah, but I always feel bad because, we always give them call times, the guest call times when we want them backstage. Sometimes they're even paid attention to and adhered to.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I don't know if it's ever possible to say, here's your, here it's only for 15 minutes. And everyone's always kind of surprised by, that's it. We're done. That's it. We're off. And so I always feel bad because I think we've had Colin on the show three times now.
yeah.
Mhm.
And I don't think I've ever done a one-on-one interview with him. It's always been on another panel. And I just feel like every time I talk to Colin Baker, he is like, it ends abruptly. Perhaps not unlike his
Tell me what you really think of me. Well, it's time to wrap up.
tenure on Doctor Who.
Maybe
You know?
that's why he's got a simmering resentment towards me over 3 different interviews that culminated in this.
I guess so. You remembered us, though. That was nice. Like, vaguely. Like, wait a minute. You look familiar. He played
Vaguely like a
halfway
bad taco
through.
he had in 1973.
Could be.
Wow.
Not too many tacos in Manchester in those days, but no, it was fun. Then what is everyone else's weekend done? Chris, you haven't done any panels. Kat did panels.
I haven't.
On
No,
Friday.
I haven't hosted any.
No.
And that's because I don't really do that anymore.
No,
Because they don't tend to go well. Not through any fault of my own.
quite a journey you're
Not through
taking
any
us
fault of
on.
my own. But
all right.
anyway, oh man, it's such a blur.
Have you seen any? Did you see any panels?
Oh yeah. I went to Verity's In Defensive.
Yeah.
As Erica sits behind
Eric
me,
is behind in the room, being very quiet.
which I had never actually gone to before. I was not even completely familiar with the format, in fact, and it was good.
You had to stand at the back. Excuse me, could you explain the
Stop,
rules,
rewind,
please?"
explain.
Yeah.
Well, obviously the rules get explained for everybody at
Yeah,
the outset. Deb did a diligent job of that, but basically a question or a comment is presented, and
Right.
people have to
Usually outrageous.
usually outrageous to have to defend that, and so I got to submit one. Lynn,
Did you really?
I did.
Oh.
Lynn was handing out pens and index cards for questions, and so I put my hand up to get a card. And she's like, "Okay, Ringer, here you go."
Right.
But so I got to submit Adric. Adric is the epitome of masculinity in Doctor Who, and make people defend that statement.
Right.
That's difficult.
That was Sarah Murphy.
I was going to say, that was
our
Sarah
good friend
Murphy's
Sarah
one,
Murphy handily won that. That debate.
I wasn't there, but I heard she was declared the GOAT of this game.
She was.
Yeah,
She was
very well.
on fine form.
Mm-hmm. I had to leave just before she got on, I think, but more about that later. But why I had to leave, Warren? Because you had an interview panel with Craig Ells and Patrick O'Kane right after that.
It went quite well. Yeah. I was surprised because I was running out of questions, frankly, at a point. And Patrick O'Kane's a very soft-spoken, very interesting, but a very soft-spoken guy.
He is, as we saw on the live show, he's nothing like.
No,
like you can tell how good an
like
actor he is because he's nothing
and then
like
you watch the
Rashad.
Power of the Doctor commentary, which you did. We'll talk about later. But then you see that how much of that suit bulks him up, right? And he moves in it in such a way, which you talked about in the panel about how he kind of moved like a cat and he moved with a lot of physicality, and he doesn't appear like he's going to. He looks like a professor, really.
Yeah,
and then Craig Ells, who was a surprisingly hot man underneath that fur.
He did you?
I did.
You did. What did you tell him, Chris, this weekend?
The there's a lot of love for Craig Ells and his attractiveness. So Kat had a panel this afternoon with Patrick O'Kane and Craig Ells and 4 others for creature actors. So
did great with that, by the way.
She was. I didn't get the chance to see it, but you did. And she was fantastic, I'm told. But I went and met her by the stage door afterward, and all the actors came out. So I like huddled them. We got a nice group shot, all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And I just was talking to Craig Ells for a moment, and I'm like, "Are you aware of that?" And he hadn't heard.
Really?
But
now he knows.
Now he knows. So I'm sure that's a nice ego boost.
He's in a video, a Baywatch spoof video that Richard Price and Simon Carew and Craig Ells went down to the beach and shot that. So he's in that too on the beach there, folks, looking for more Craig Ells thirst content. But
boy am I.
Yeah. No, and then apart from the live show, all I did was the live commentary for Power of the Doctor with Chris Chibnall, Sophie Aldred, Janet Fielding, Jamie Magnustone, Daft Shermer. And I have to admit, I feel guilty because last week I kept saying, don't go to Paul Cornell's death match, go to the commentary. Because I didn't think that a live commentary would be like a big thing. But literally every panel that Chris Chibnall is on this weekend.
And he is on about 8,000 of them.
Was jam-packed. And that thing was packed. I looked up at the end and said, oh my God, like there's a lot of people here. I didn't think there would be that many people to come and watch a show that they can't actually hear.
And barely see, depending on who you're sitting behind.
Exactly, yeah. But
looking at you, Chris.
It went really well.
I'm looking through you.
It was a lot of fun.
Guilty.
I love doing live commentaries. Afterwards, I just chatting with Janet Fielding and Chris Chibnall be backstage, and it's remarkable how much that whole episode means to Janet Fielding. Like you can tell, like even when she's off stage, she's just sort of talking honestly to Chibnall, and it's like, yeah, this meant something to her, which is really cool.
Well, it was her first time on camera in a while.
38 years, and just the story behind it. Actually, there was I didn't know this. The this or that happened today with Kim and Sage from Head Over Fields with Sophie and Janet. It was a bit of a hybrid one. There was a this or that, but also for about the first half, it was talk of Power of the Doctor.
Oh.
And there was some really good insights into a couple of scenes, like Janet Fielding, when the scene where Peter Davison isn't there, but when she meets the hologram, Psyche, Fifth Doctor, and talks with him, that day or that morning at 3 a.m., she got a phone call to say that a good friend of hers had died. And like that's what's going through her head when she's shooting that scene. And it's just like, now that I see that, know that, like looking back at it, it's just like there's a lot of pain and sadness in her performance there, and I can't help but think that is just in the back of her mind.
Yeah,
these are things you find out at panels at Gallifrey One. Like at the Jodie Whittaker panel, which I was just at with Deb Stanish interviewing Jodie, and then later on Chris Chibnall came. It was packed. The place was packed. Neither of you made it in to this one?
No, I've never. No. I don't even try anymore. Yeah. I know I'm not going to get in. So
Kat had a panel opposite the Jodie Whittaker interview, and anyone who was in a panel or hosting a panel, whatever, was given like kind of like priority passes for the second Jodie Whittaker interview for Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Which, as we record this, it's Saturday.
Right.
So I do have a pass for that.
Nice. It's actually a physical, like little
it's a little
slip of paper.
It's actually that key that came on her hand in the intro video.
And
You just hold her hand open. Oh, wow.
And then it shows up. It's pretty weird. Defying physics somehow.
And this afternoon, waiting for you at one point, Warren and I were talking to Ty Gooden, who's doing the
morning one.
The morning one.
Which will have happened by the time this episode comes out. But
Indeed. So she seemed excited.
Mm-hmm.
And then she's talking about having talked to Lawrence Fishburne not that long ago. So I'm like...
And she said he was super hyped, like he just got off a shoot or something, because he was like very hyper, apparently.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm like, but Lawrence Fishburne, that voice, you can say whatever you want. Read the phone book. I don't care.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's cool.
I also did a panel today.
Yes. Daniel Anthony. Sarah Jane Adventures. How'd that go?
Great. He is a very charming fella, very super nice, and is alternately touching and funny, because of course we're talking about Elizabeth Slade, right? And, people learned a lot from her on that show. But one of my favorite questions of the whole thing was somebody asked, because I did audience questions, and somebody asked if you could be part of like a big franchise like Marvel or Star Wars or whatever, who would you want to play? And he said, I'd love to be Miles Morales. And I'm like, damn it, yes. He would make a great Miles Morales. And then I said to him, the thing is, 2 of the Spider-Men are already Brits, so I think you're in there.
Right. I had to wonder who Miles Morales was.
He's the Black Spider-Man in the comics. And in the Spider-Verse.
The
Spider-Verse animated movies too, yeah.
Okay, there we go.
And the comics.
Oh, they made comics out of that movie too, did they?
God, never mind. Keep going.
Didn't know that. Today on the show, because Chris has ordered food, so we're like kind of ripping through our memories of Gallifrey One. I'm sure we'll probably decompress a little bit once the weekend is over. Today on the show, Chris and I, you and I talked to Simon Guerrier.
Oh dear God, was that a conversation?
All about David Whitaker. All about David Whitaker.
Simon, I mean, we've talked about Simon doing the Whitaker book due out later in the year, but he gave a presentation this morning on, well, some of his research up to this point. And as you'll hear in the interview, the breadth and the strangeness involved in Whitaker's life and career is just fascinating beyond belief.
Yeah, it's very interesting. We'll get to it in a second before spoiling it too much. Warren, you weren't there, so this is all new to you.
I'll listen to the interview.
Yep, some housekeeping though. So tomorrow, I want to point out, tomorrow being Sunday, so this is coming out like what, noon, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. I have to think about that. I wanted to check out the Blu-ray panel.
1 o'clock.
Yep. I'll tell you what. I'll confirm this news. The animations are happening again.
Oh, good.
Not with Rob Ritchie.
Not with Rob Ritchie.
Yet, perhaps. Maybe he'll come back. No, I think he told me that the team behind Evil of the Daleks is making them again. They found new funding. He didn't go into specifics of where that funding came from, but the
Rob is a
very,
very nice guy. Very pleasant
great.
guy. You and him hit it off last year.
We did, lying on the grass in the sun. And he had these spoof Target new adventures.
Oh, that's where those come from. Okay.
Which if you've seen them on Twitter, we won't spoil it here, but
they're quite baudy.
They're very baudy. I saw
AWDY.
I saw Paul Cornell had put a couple of pictures of them on Instagram. One of them is what's the title? Bloody Tories or something like that.
Rotten Bloody
Tories by Russell T. Davis. And RTD commented on Paul Cornell's Instagram post.
I didn't know that. That's
saying,
awesome.
I love this.
Right.
And then I think Rob Ritchie replied with, I'll have to get you a copy.
Right. As he meets with Russell to work on the new series of Doctor Who. So the Simon Guerrier is coming up today. Tomorrow, which Monday, as this is released, Monday we'll probably put out one more episode. Because we'll probably have 2 or 3 interviews, hopefully, on the Sunday to put out. And then, kids, we're going to post it early on our Patreon feed. But next week, Warren and I sat down for an hour with departing Doctor Who showrunner Chris Chibnall. He gave us like an hour and a half time to talk to us about
what a lovely fellow.
Everything. Yeah. So that is going to happen next week, because I feel it's something that needs to be built up to, and it'll be dropping for our Patreon supporters early, probably sometime on Sunday, I think.
One thing I just want to say about Chris Chibnall, I've seen him around. I've yet to have a chance to talk to him, but he is living his best galley.
Oh yeah, he is.
Yeah,
He really is.
absolutely.
He's loving every second of this.
He's working like a dog. He's on a bajillion panels and all that. But I wasn't nearby because I was on the wrong floor of the hotel apparently. But last night, I guess he was up just socializing with people till like 4:00 in the morning.
Yep.
And then up whatever time today to do.
He called us amateurs on off mic when he asked how late we stayed up.
I know. 1:30 was when we turned in.
And more importantly than anything else, obviously there have been some less than happy opinions about Chibnall, his work, his era, as time has gone on for the last 5 years. But I have heard absolutely nothing negative.
No.
About interactions with him.
Mm-hmm.
He has said how much fun he's having, how much, and I don't know. I'm thinking this is all kicked off by Mandip Gill and her appearance the other year.
Nobody's asked her, Jodie, about this because she was the catalyst, I think, to all this.
I think so.
And with Jodie and Mandip being so tight, you'd think that, you have to go to Gallifrey One. It's great. Yeah. But I don't know yet.
And Chibnall probably was told as well. I mean, he's a longtime Doctor Who fan. He knows,
and he's known about the convention. He's sent videos and stuff to it
for
and everything
years.
else. You know, so you're right. This is his the culmination of his time on Doctor Who was to attend Gallifrey One as a featured guest.
Yeah. Well, I was talking to somebody earlier on, and they were saying how when Moffat made his return to Galley, it had been a few years since he left the show. It was time to cool down and have people reflect and whatever. But I mean, everything was finished shooting wise October-ish 2021.
Yeah.
But Chibnall's still fresh off the show, basically.
Yeah.
And he's not letting sleeping dogs lie. He's here. He's like I said, he's living his best galley.
Yep.
And he seems to be having fun. And I just love the positivity that has been expressed toward him, or at least lack of negativity, I guess. Whatever.
No, I think it is positivity. I think it is a great deal of positivity because they are interested in hearing how the last 5 years were made. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of appreciation of people who really enjoyed the last 5 years as well, you know.
But he had his onstage interview with Gary Russell. He was part of the of Jodie Whittaker's interview panel today. He's been on
there's a writing for TV
and film production panel.
The commentary that I did with him, I think he's on at least one or two on Sunday as well. Another commentary, I think he's on. I think with Adrian Enderle, I think is.
I think so. Yeah.
Astounding. I really like him. I really like Chris.
Very
Chibnall.
friendly guy.
He is one of the friendliest people I've ever met, who are involved in the making of Doctor Who, and he was the person at the head of making it for the last 5 years. You know,
it's definitely a case of, at least I'm sure for some people, being able to separate the art from the artist.
We even talk about that to an extent, sort of, in the interview. Yeah. He also said after the interview, if I didn't have a panel, I'd be here for 2 more hours because he just loves talking about this stuff.
Yeah. It's very interesting, but so is our conversation with Simon Guerrier, which after the break, you will hear. So we're standing out here on the grassy knoll with Chris. Hello, Chris.
Hello.
And Simon Guerrier, who I made such a hullabaloo about catching your David Whitaker panel at 10 a.m., and then I missed it. So all the information that I would have gleaned from you watching that panel, I have to ask you all about now. Simon, welcome.
I like the way that you've done that, so that for the benefit of the listener, you chose not to go to my panel. That's a generous thing that you've done there.
Exactly, because then I would just be nodding along and thinking, yep, no, we don't have to go over that again. But since I don't know, the listener doesn't know. So what was your panel about today?
So my panel was about David Whitaker, the first story editor of Doctor Who. As some of your listeners may know, I was the consultant on Looking for David, which is a documentary on the Season 2 Blu-ray. And in the course of doing that research, I found out loads more stuff, and I found out more stuff since. So I'm doing a biography of David Whitaker that will be out later this year.
Yes.
And my presentation was to share some of what I have found and some of the connections I've made.
So what did you find initially for the documentary? Did the documentary come up because of what you found, or did they say, we're doing a documentary, go do some research for him?
So I originally, in 2016, I pitched to the Black Archive series a book, and my pitch was I want to do something on the evil of the Daleks, but I don't know what I'm going to write. what I want to do, number one, is I want to go to the Written Archive Centre in Caversham, the BBC's centre, because I've never been, and every time I've tried to go, it's not worked out.
Right.
So I'm pitching to you as an excuse to go. And what I want to do is, not knowing what I'm going to find and where I'm going to go with this, I just want to kind of go and research stuff and dig through some archives and and interview people and stuff, not really knowing where it's going to go. And that was, and bless them, because they're brilliant, they said, yeah, all right. And so what I got into with that is, how do you judge and how do you assess a story that largely doesn't exist, and how can that be tangible to study? But off the back of that research, one of the things that I couldn't really go into in the book was David Whitaker's really interesting and very little known, and lots of the things that are said about him in short biographies and paragraph biographies are wrong, and I could show that they're wrong. So for example, a thing that's said quite a lot is that he wrote a stage play for the Theatre Royal York, which was spotted by somebody from the BBC script unit, and they bought it and put it on TV, which suggests that David Whitaker had a kind of passive role. He was working in theatre and the BBC went, that's our guy.
Right.
Actually, he didn't write a stage play for the Theatre Royal. He spent more than a year pitching stuff to the BBC because he wanted to be in television, not radio, in television. And finally he got through. Having got his first play on television, he went for a meeting basically to flog them more plays, and they said, we've got a job on the staff for 3 months. And he went, I'm in. And then he was there for 7 years. And so he was actively trying to get into television and doing everything he could, and pitching. He pitched comedy sketches, he pitched dramas, he pitched a musical. So you can see this kind of diversity, and that's a completely different sense of him from what he said in these biographies and stuff. So that, and I thought there's something there.
Right.
So I started looking into it, thinking I could do this for Doctor Who magazine as a big feature. And then Tom Spilsbury left Doctor Who magazine. Marcus Hearn took over, and he said, I don't really want to do 4 or 5 features of 5,000 words each on the life of David Whitaker. I will take an 1,800 word thing if you've got a story. And I was like, oh, well, there's the time he went to Moscow, and there's the time he did this, and look at how he was working in Doctor Who comics and how that fed into the TV show. So I've done that. And Chris Chapman, brilliant producer director for the Blu-rays, knew I'd done this research on David Whitaker and said, we're thinking about doing a documentary. What have you got? What would you be willing to share? What would you, whatever? And I kind of said, look, anything I've got you can have. There are these areas that I've never quite got to because I can't afford to go and do the research and whatever. So we came to an accommodation where he kind of gave me some money, and I went off and finished. I thought I was going to go and finish the research,
Right.
and I still haven't finished. I found out new stuff here at the Gallifrey One connection. John Peddle gave me a really good tip-off on Friday night, and it's already paid dividends. So I know new things.
Is that a secret? Can you divulge the information that John Peddle?
Yes. So Dallas Jones, who may be known to some of your listeners in the Australian fan community,
Okay.
he met David Whitaker's second wife, Stephanie, when she was a guest of their organisation, and she had 2 items of Doctor Who related stuff, one of which was a Japanese edition of the Daleks, the novelisation, which she gave to Dallas. That's now his treasured possession. And also she said she had the invitation that had been sent to David Whitaker for the party held by the BBC to celebrate 15 years of Doctor Who in 1978.
Wow.
And we've got photos of that party with Tom Baker with his slicked hair wearing a dinner jacket.
Is that what that's from? I've seen photos of that. Okay.
And John Poe is there, and Patrick Troughton's there, and whatever. So David Whitaker can't be seen in any of the pictures, but the tantalising thought is he was there at the end of his life, reunited with Doctor Who and things. And I find that quite interesting, and then that ties into when did he get involved in Target Books, which was what he was doing at the end of his life and stuff. So all of those kind of connections, you can hear that this excites me a great deal, and everybody else is kind of like, what?
So what? When you presented stuff for the documentary, then did the documentary have a hook, or was it just let's explore David Whitaker? Because the stuff that you found out towards the 1970, I think, is what Chris has something to ask.
Well, I was going to say, because the first of that series was looking for Peter R. Newman. Was this going to be a continuing thing as well, I guess?
Well, looking for Lenny and all that.
Well, yeah.
So Chris and Toby wanted to make the next in that series.
Right.
That was basically what they came to me about. And I said, this is, if you watch those in order, the Peter R. Newman one, which is a brilliant piece of work, and also changes what the Sensorites is. If you watch the Sensorites again, having seen that documentary, it's a completely different story because of the context you bring to it, which is an amazing thing to do. And that's what they wanted to make. So I kind of had an idea of this is how many beats this documentary will have, and this is how many people we will talk to. Whereas Chris just went, how many people can we squeeze into this? How much? And really went to town on it. And amazing. He's a real logistical miracle is what he did. And even as we were recording stuff, he was going, and can we talk to so-and-so, and can we talk to so-and-so? And then a couple of months after we'd filmed everything or recorded everything, I made contact with David Whitaker's nephew and niece, who've given me quite a lot of material since, and it was like, can we go and get them in it? No, it's a bit late, and we've already got loads of stuff, and if we get them in it, we're going to have to lose something. So, but yeah, all of that to make a really rich and big portrait. And he also did the thing that I would never have thought of, which is the problem with biography is it never has a happy ending.
Yeah, because everyone always dies at the end.
Yeah, spoiler, but and nobody ever achieves all the things they want to. So it's always there are things left undone. So Chris had the brilliant idea to not tell the story chronologically. And you go, and it completely changes what that is, and it becomes a celebration of his life, which has massively informed what I did this morning on my panel and what I'm going to do in my book.
So, I mean, on that note, I'll completely switch gears and go to the what happened and why he sort of left television, or why television left him, I suppose one might say, like in the late 60s, early 70s, with him thinking he was being blacklisted. This is one of the. I almost want to treat it as a spoiler for those who haven't seen the documentary yet. But tell me about discovering all the info about that.
So I knew one of the things I read was the history of the Writers Guild of Great Britain, written by a guy called Nick Yap, who I'm now good friends with, in which he had gone through all the paperwork from the Writers Guild, which included all of this stuff about a big spat where it's a kind of complicated story. So Alexander Solzhenitsyn wrote a book called One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich, which was published in the early 60s, and it's basically a fictionalized account of his own experience being in the gulags in Russia. And it's how the sort of institution of this poverty and misery and being really hungry shapes his whole worldview. And the book kind of crested a wave in the early 60s after the death of Stalin, where even the Russians were kind of going, yeah, maybe we went too far, you know. And so it's very successful, very met with a lot of acclaim worldwide, but also in Russia that was okay. And then as the 60s went on, the culture in Russia changed, and maybe they didn't want to talk about Stalin being such a bad guy. And so they kind of came down on Solzhenitsyn without doing anything too noticeable. So you just couldn't buy his books anymore.
Right.
You couldn't, so he just became a non-person, basically. And people in the West were like, where's the guy gone? We haven't heard from him. And then he's smuggling out books. Mm-hmm. Like he's written a new thing and it's smuggled out. It's like, why has he smuggled that out? And what's going on? And then in January, or around January 1969, the Russian equivalent of the Writers Guild basically booted him out. And it was the first concrete thing, or is one, it's a concrete example of this. So various groups around the world. Well, like, how do we respond to this? What do we do? So, for example, in 1970, he won the Nobel Prize for Literature for a book he'd written 10 years before, which is kind of like them going, we've got his back, you know. Solidarity, basically. And the Writers Guild in the UK had an emergency meeting in about May-ish 69, going, what are we going to do? Because in July, the International Screenwriters Guild is meeting, is having a congress in Moscow, and we're supposed to go. Are we going to say anything? Right. Are we going to be very British and just be awkward and be quiet? What do we do? And big debate, hotly contested, and there were people like George Markstein, who was the script editor of The Prisoner, with Patrick McGoohan. He's the guy that Patrick McGoohan resigns to in the title sequence. Yep. So his family had fled Berlin and Germany just before the outbreak of the Second World War. And he was like, I've got views on totalitarianism. You do not engage. Right. We do not go. We do not discuss this. We just say what you've done is wrong and we don't do anything. There are other people who are going, we shouldn't get involved in politics. Go and be polite. Right. You know, just go along and have the canapes and be nice. And lots of different views. But the vote came down. What should happen is 2 delegates should be sent to Russia and they should find a way to protest the treatment of Solzhenitsyn. Okay. So David Whitaker, respected former chair of the Writers Guild, and the General Secretary of the Writers Guild, who was at that point a guy called Alan Griffiths, they go out to Moscow. They've sought legal advice before they go. They've talked to various people who run committees and stuff, and they basically have a plan, which is, if we add anything to the agenda, it'll just get vetoed. Right. So what we've got to do is we've got to find a meeting, find a discussion group, like a panel, and when it comes to questions and does anybody want to add anything, we go, we got something we'd like to add. And what they come up with is they're not even going to mention Solzhenitsyn by name. They're going to, it's like something out of a thriller thing. They go, what we're going to do is we're going to say, you know how McCarthyism in America was bad and it treated communist and socialist people badly? Right. We should make sure that never happens. So we'd like everybody to sign a thing saying the state shouldn't be involved in a writer producing something from their conscience. Right. So that's what they did. Mm-hmm. And the Russians went, we can see what you're doing. Mm-hmm. We're not going to play this game. And it all got very messy and stuff. And then there was discussions and there was arguments. And the American delegation kind of organised a compromise and a thing. And something was signed. David Whitaker and Alan Griffiths came back to the UK going, look what we've achieved. We've got them to sign this thing and whatever. Which the Russians then ignored. So then what do you do? So this then kind of spirals out into the newspapers get a whiff of it. There's stuff in the Telegraph, there's stuff in the Times going on. So that was in July 1969 when Whitaker was supposed to be writing Ambassadors of Death. Mm-hmm. It's in the press in November, December, just as Whitaker's taken off Ambassadors of Death. It's still running in the new year. In March 1970, there's a big piece in the Times sort of slagging off everybody who was involved, and David Whitaker is a traitor and whatever. And in June, at the AGM of the Writers Guild, so a year after their vote, there's this massive fight about what's happened. And Markstein accuses Whitaker of having written a secret report that he delivered to the heads of the Writers Guild, and the report that he published, and that, you know, and there's all of this stuff. And Whitaker kind of goes, I've been the subject of a poison pen letter campaign and nuisance phone calls to people I'm working for and whatever. So it's all horrible. And he's also not working. He has no, he's very, very, having been really prolific, there's no work. So he was of the view, as he wrote in a letter in 1971, that basically his career was depth charged by this thing, that he and his wife became persona non grata. Mm-hmm. And they had nothing, and she then got offered a job after a year of no work. She got offered a job at an arts festival in Perth in Australia, and they went, and she did that job and came back to the UK, and David Whitaker went, I'm going to stay here. It's nice, it's sunny here, and I've got work. And he was offered a prestigious thing. So That's a very long-winded way of saying it's a really interesting, nuts story.
Yeah.
But he was definitely of the opinion that was what it was all down to.
Now, you said you want to focus at, like, your panel today was a celebration, the documentary was a celebration. How, when you come to finish the book, how will you approach that? Because that ties up the last decade of his life, essentially, is sort of what happens after and his lack of a career in some ways. So how do you package all that and make it look all sunny in book form?
Well, yes. So that is a... So there's other things, because he Australia goes well for him for a while, and then that stops. And the reasons for why that all stops is difficult and complicated. There's not a huge paper trail. And he comes back to the UK, tries to set things up in the UK, and none of it really takes. And a bit like with Sidney Newman, who also had left and came back, it's like everything's moved on. You know, and if you read Graham Burke's amazing Head of Drama book about Sidney Newman, there's the awful moment where Verity Lambert is working at Thames Television, and Sidney Newman's going, "I've got an idea for a TV show," and Verity Lambert's like, "Well, maybe we could just give you some money," and he's, "No, I don't want you just to give me money, and I don't want pity.
Right.
I want to make TV," and it's really sad. And David Whitaker has a similar thing. He's going to meetings with people, he's talking to people, none of it quite works, and then he's got cancer and he is ill. Mm-hmm. But that thing that I've discovered about him going to the party means that he was moving within the Doctor Who world. And there's a quote from David Fisher, who just mentions offhand in an old interview, I spoke to David Whitaker after he'd come back from Australia, and he goes, so he was moving with the people who were writing Doctor Who at the time, and then he's on Target Books and things. And I think the more I've been thinking about this, the more I think that the sort of positive thing about that is the fact that he was just being recognised as being part of the bedrock of Doctor Who. And what I mean by that is that, for one thing, if you're a fan of Doctor Who, you don't just watch it, you participate in it.
Yeah.
Okay? And participation is, there's a cliffhanger and you worry all week about what's going to happen. Or you write stuff, or you dress up, or you want to know from the people who made it how they made it. And it's all about being part of it, being a participant. And that is all Whitaker. In the books he wrote, in the annuals he wrote, in the comic strips he wrote, in the letters he wrote to fans who wrote into the programme, in him commissioning Malcolm Hulke to write a guide for writers, what you need to know if you want to be a writer, that then led to, because that sold very well, Matt Hulke was like, well, what else can I do? Yeah. I'm going to write a making of Doctor Who. And he said to Terence Dix, can I do a making of Doctor Who? And Terence went, can I help and get paid?
Right.
And Whitaker was involved in that. So all of those kind of things, that's Whitaker was involved in. And I I've been looking at things today, kind of going, everyone here is the legacy of that.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that's my happy ending.
That's a very happy ending. What's the name of the book and when's it coming out?
So David Whitaker in an Exciting Adventure with Television.
Oh, wonderful.
Will be out as soon as I finish writing it. Which, that's a sore point. Yeah. Everybody's asking me the same thing. Yeah, when I finished. Yeah, I know. It should be out around September.
Excellent. Well, we won't detain you any further. Get back to work, Simon. Thank you very much.
Bless you. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Always great to talk about anything to do with Doctor Who with Simon.
Oh God, his depth of knowledge is just extreme.
So good. After we stopped recording, we were talking about like Anthony Coburn. Like that's a whole thing. And
that was a deep cut.
That's a deep cut that he's not doing anything with.
No,
someone else
is. But I don't know.
I don't know where that is.
It hasn't been announced, so I don't think so. Yeah, we won't spoil anything.
Yeah, but no, always great to hear from Simon Guerrier and see him. It's been 2 or 3 years since he's been to this convention. As indeed have you two.
When I moved to London many years ago, Simon was one of the first friends I made over there, and I just love him.
Yeah, just wonderful. All right, well, Chris needs to eat. We need to go party or something like that. The Saturday night beckons for us, so we'll talk to you on Monday, everyone. So until next time, I am Stephen at Gallifrey One.
Warren at Gallifrey One.
And Chris at Gallifrey One.
So long for now.
You've been listening to Radio Free Skaro. Find us online at radiofreeskaro.com. Follow us on Twitter and Tumblr at Radio Free Skaro. Subscribe to us on iTunes and donate to the show at patreon.com/Radio Free Skaro. Thank you.